Hello everyone, nubkeks here. Welcome back to Nub Raids, where we've got some news kicking off the day. First of all, the smaller, less controversial bit of news. We are going to be having multiple shard events this weekend. Kind of as we expected, honestly. So, excuse me, on Friday, this is November 24th, 2x champions from Ancient Shards. On Saturday, 25th, it's going to be from Voids. And on Sunday, the 26th, it's going to be from Sacred Shards. These are not going to be part of the fusion, but they are going to be part of a bounty deck of fate, which I don't know. I think it's certainly interesting. This bounty deck of fate is going to be running from the start of Thursday to the start of Monday. Now, what is doubly interesting about this is actually back in the news. It is going to overlap. Thursday is actually part of these progressive chance events as well. On Thursday, we've got Bellatar Mage Slayer, Crockmar, and Knocked the Paralyzer. It's a fairly underwhelming one, but it does overlap with that summoning event. So it's something, it's something for you to consider. Like Bellatar, I think he's actually all right, but he's certainly not as exciting as Krisk or Cardiol. And then I think Crockmar is quite decent as well, but I wouldn't be a big fan of Knocked. But yeah, I think people would certainly chase some shards for Crockmar. So yeah, I think that's intriguing. What is this deck of fate going to be, this bounty deck of fate? Well, here we go. Let me see. Yeah, earning fate points by getting artifacts and accessories, so dungeon divers and summoning champions. So I'd say most of your points are going to come from summoning champions, right? Dungeon divers is just a misery in general. It just sucks, and it's never really been particularly good for this deck of fate. Like, you might get a few thousand points from dungeon divers, but really it's nearly all going to come from just summoning with your shards. It's a bunch of 2x events. What you get for it? Well, there's going to be legendary Killstroke and Divine Speed gear, and there's going to be mythical Killstroke, chest, gauntlets, and boots, and Divine Speed, chest, gauntlets, and boots. So, like, a lot of these chest, gauntlets, boots are going to be bad, right? They're going to be stats that you're not really going to use, most likely. So, like, with Killstroke, you're really looking for damage stats, and if you don't get those, it's much less valuable. Like, even an accuracy chest piece, and Killstroke, not particularly great. Divine Speed, you're kind of just looking for all speed. But if you max out this whole event, you probably will walk away with some good gear. They've done one of these gear events before, and I was actually a massive fan of it, though it was more tied in with artifact enhancement then. But I like these deck of fates where you get gear. I think they're actually quite fun. Yes, you're going to get some junk, but there's probably so much gear in here, you're bound to get a few good pieces, and it could be a fairly big impact on your account. Like, the amount of time, the amount of energy you'd have to spend farming Dragon to get good speed gear versus getting speed gear from here, like, it actually probably works out as an interesting trade-off. So we'll see. I'll probably break this down tomorrow when it goes live. I am intrigued by it, but, for me, being late game, the gear is pretty enticing, but, I mean, summoning in 2x events is not particularly enticing. So we'll see exactly what the points end up being, how many shards you would need. I'll break that down tomorrow. Now, the other the other big change, like, honestly, like, man, we've had a lot of wars in the real world recently. Now, if you think those are bad, you should see Content Creator Chat today after this change. Dear Lord. Ugir the Wyrmeater, the current fusion, and I believe we're halfway through the fusion. Let me see. I should be around, I don't know, 50-ish fragments, I'm assuming. I'm actually up to 60. Look at this beautiful animation. So we're actually over halfway through the fusion. So your ability to complete the fusion is it's non-existent, right? If you haven't already done in fact, you need to do all of it. If you haven't done everything, you can't get them unless you do half of it and spend a big chunk of money on fragments afterwards. But he is getting buffed, right? He is getting buffed. His passive, which at the time of recording, like previously, would only activate on active skills. When an enemy actively used a skill to revive, he would counteract with his A2, which is a buff strip, an AoE attack, and can place weaken. This is being changed, though, to affect passives and revive on death as well. I think it's just by itself, before we talk about the timing of it, which I think is what is actually, let me show you that I've actually made a cheat sheet for you. Before we talk about whether this change is effective, I've made a cheat sheet to get you on the right path straight away. So here we go. This is so that you're reacting the proper way. Okay, so that's what's most important, right? So here you go. I've put this together. Now, if you own a champion and it's buffed, you're pretty happy. Okay. Smiling face. You're happy. If you don't own a champion and it's buffed, okay? Angry. Not good. That is not good because I don't have him. Now, if you do own a champion and it's nerfed, if your champion you own is made worse, angry, right? No, there is never any justification. But if you don't own the champion and it is nerfed, you're happy. Okay, so these are the attitudes you have to have. Like if you disagree on this, you're obviously simply wrong, and you'll be burned at the stake, obviously, for such heresy. But there you go. This is a little cheat to help you out. There's also an additional couple of caveats here. It is a little more. I've made it a bit too simple. It's a little more complicated. So first of all, if you are happy, right? If you apply the cheat sheet and you find yourself at a smiley face, you should have your happiness. Okay. Tone it down by 50%. On the flip side, if you're angry, right, if you get to an angry face, then you need to double, right? Multiply it by 200% on that anger, on your rage, okay? When you apply this cheat sheet, you will now have achieved optimal reaction skills to any balance changes in Raid Shadow Legends. So you're welcome. I hope this is helpful to you. So yeah, with Ugir the Wyrmeater, again, if we apply the cheat sheet, okay, if you are doing the fusion right now, so you will own the champion, he's getting buffed, you should be happy, okay? If you're doing the fusion, you're happy. If you don't own the champion, right, if you have skipped this fusion, he's buffed, you need to be angry, okay? So that's where you're at, just so you know. This buff, it's a kind of a nifty little buff. I think specifically, like, what passive revives are there in the game? There's Marishka. It's like okay against that they mentioned. I think he already worked against Lydia, the Lydia passive revive. It already countered that, which is kind of cool. I think the big one is Wukong. I think that makes quite a big difference to probably a lot of players. Like, enemies start drafting in Wukong, he can keep reviving himself with 100% HP and turn meter. That can be very difficult to deal with for a lot of people. I think Ugir gives you if you've done the fusion, a fairly accessible way to build a potential counter to that. And I think that's kind of cool. So I think that's decent. I think, it's not bad against, let's say, Cardial is a fairly common revive on death champion. It will give you, a little bit of kickback against that. I will say, seeing his buff strip is a big part of it. Really, none of these revive on death champs or passive revives bring them back with buffs, so you're not really benefiting from that. So you might be looking to build Ugir with a bit more damage to, in theory, like one-shot a Wukong or something like that, and that could be pretty decent. I don't think it makes him crazy more powerful. I think it's just a nice little buff, and honestly, this was feedback that the content creators gave as well. I do feel a little bad for Plarium here. It's a sort of damned if you do, damned if you don't thing. You saw my video from a couple of days ago. Like, I will happily criticize them when it's due. But I do feel bad for them in this scenario because, they put this champion out and the feedback overwhelming that the community and the content creators gave was this champion's pretty underwhelming. He could do with a buff. And specifically, his passive doesn't feel that impactful. They came back and, like, some of the feedback we gave, I think I even gave the feedback, would be, hey, it'd be pretty cool if it did, counteract passives and it'd be a decent against Sun Wukong. They come back and they buff him, they put in the changes, reacting to the feedback, doing what people asked for. And it's like, how dare you do this now because it's too late in the fusion. So, yeah, now they dug themselves their own hole a little bit. I think it's unfortunate. This buff, by the way, is coming live, I think they said in around January, because they have to make some changes to the game engine, and that's why that previously it wasn't able to. That's something that, they really should probably have worked out ahead of time, put a different fusion out first if the game engine can't quite make this fusion do what you want. So I think it was a reaction to feedback, and they're changing it because of that. That feels, it feels bad to get angry at Plarium for that, right? Actually positively reacting to feedback and making balancing changes, that's a good thing. So feels a bit bad. I think I do think it's overreaction, how mad people are getting. Like, I don't think it makes this fusion crazy better. It makes him a bit better and makes him kind of a decent thing to Wukong, which is good. And that might have changed some people's attitude to doing this fusion, but he's still pretty close to as good as he was before. Like, I think he's fairly B tier, maybe A tier. And my opinion hasn't really changed. I think, maybe skews it a little bit higher, but he's sort of straddling that borderline for me, depending on how early game or late game you are. I think the later you go, obviously nearly all the champions in the game fall off. You're really just looking for the best of the best. I think he's a great progression champion. I think it's helpful, especially against Wukong's and like Tag Arena, Live Arena. So that's going to be kind of cool. I'm interested to see what happens with him. I think it's certainly going to be important in the future. You know, if Plarium wants to change the champion, it's really better to try to get that change out early, or at least to announce that they're intending to potentially change it early, so that, I mean, I think that would even be preferable if they're like, yo, we might buff Ugir. We're taking a look at Ugir. We might buff him. People say, oh, you might buff him. Okay, I'll do part of it. Even if they did part of the fusion, and then Plarium says, okay, actually, we've looked at it. It's too difficult to make it happen, or we've decided against it. Then people would be like, man, you forced me to do half the fusion. Screw you. They'd be really mad. I think, you know, there's kind of a narrow window, isn't there, where, you know, they have to react to that feedback. I think it's important that they do that, right? If they don't want people to get mad. It's tough, right? Like, when is a good time? If a fusion needs to be buffed, when is a good time to do it? Midway during the fusion? After the fusion? You know, I think the only answer that's acceptable is for people is generally a very, very small window, which is like right as the fusion starts, and I can still decide whether to go for it or not. And that's a very small window. I think it's certainly a bit of a pity if we're not open-minded to any balance changes happening to fusions than ever. I don't know. We'll see. It's something I'm hoping to see more going forwards, honestly, is more balancing to the game. And I think if you see more consistent balancing, like buffs to champions that need it, like everyone said Ugir did, that's a good thing for the game. And when that becomes more of an expectation, I think this won't make people as angry. I think it's just the fact that there's basically been no balancing for ages. And then a balancing happens halfway through a fusion when it's too late. People get mad. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. This is an awkward thing from Plarium, right? It's like, everyone said this fusion needs a buff. We want to buff him, but there's no good way to do it at that point, right? I think that's difficult. So yeah, let me know what you think about it. Yeah, like I would say don't. I think FOMO kicks in big time, and people get really upset that they've potentially missed it. Like, you know, you will survive, right? Like, you know, you guys know I'm frustrated about missing Emic. I missed the Emic Trunk Art fusion because I was just dumb. Like, I did not finish one of the artifact enhancement events because I was busy at the weekend. I forgot about it, and I missed the fusion, right? Emic turned out to be pretty good, right? He's great for a lot of things. Better than I thought he was going to be, actually. So I'm like, yeah, man, it's a bummer to miss Emic, but you know what? It's fine. You can move on. It's fine. There's plenty of different ways you can do things in this game without that champion. You're going to be okay. It's going to be okay, guys. Don't worry. It's fine. So yeah, that's sort of my take on the Ugir thing. I actually hope to see more balancing for fusions in the future. If they, you know, I don't know. It's a little bit. It's a difficult line to thread there, because, or to tread. Is it to thread? A line to thread or a line to tread? I don't know. But it's difficult because I feel like people tend to be way too negative about new champions and new fusions. They're often too pessimistic, and if Plarium came in and buffed a champion that people said sucked, you could easily end up with some really overpowered champions. So it's pretty tough, right? It's pretty tough. Like, I give you a perfect example for that is easily Razzlevarg, that had the community totally divided as to how good he was. Turns out he's actually fantastic, right? As you know, we kind of got more time playing with the champion. Like, probably my favorite Hydra team at the moment is with Razzlevarg. Like, he's an absolute monster. He's so strong. But like, we really had no idea about that for the first while. Like, it took a while before people worked out Razzlevarg's full potential. It was not immediately obvious. If Plarium had gone, wow, people think this champ sucks, let's buff him, like, they probably would have had to nerf him after that. He would have been just too crazy, you know, because he's a beast of a champ. He's super good. Anyway, that's my rant over. That's my 2 cents. Yeah, let me know what you think, guys. Thanks for watching. I'll see y'all next time. Goodbye.